My childhood was like the beginning of Marley and me. Perfect, for the most part. My family lived in a suburb of Denver, Colorado called Homestead. It was complete with cul-de-sacs, picket fences, and finely groomed lawns. I spent the winter skiing and playing hockey, and my summers locked outside, playing with friends, riding bikes, and going to the neighborhood pool. This is the point in my life that was dominated by airsoft. In my neighborhood, it was surprisingly competitive. There would be organized firefights with kids from all over the area, and me and Nico were the ringleaders of sorts. I'm not sure how many of you can relate to this, but imagine a group of 10, 11 to 15-year-olds wearing paintball gear, all in summer heat, walking down a populated main street in this South Denver suburban neighborhood. To say the least, it was a sight. My parents never quite supported our hobby. In fact, they hated it. So my brother used to make these intricate duct tape bulletproof vests. We actually still have the vest, but all right. Now Nico just made this new vest that I'm actually wearing in that picture, and we both wanted to test it out, see how well it worked. Unfortunately, I missed, and I shot his hand like 6 inches away. I'm pretty sure that hurt, and yes, it drew blood. This led to one of the better beatings I received in my childhood. Growing up with an older brother is the definition of a love-hate relationship. As kids, we didn't get along great. He has and always will have an extremely competitive nature to him. The kind that turns just about every mundane activity into a competition, which I always lost at. Chores, Monopoly, eating, everything. He was just old enough to be stronger and more skilled at sports than me, and young enough to not be the bigger man, and let me win a couple. Don't get me wrong, I love my brother, but at this age, we just didn't get along. It wasn't until the fall of 2016 we began to get along, but I'll get to that later. I had a great childhood growing up in Homestead, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. One of my neighborhood friends was named Cole. We did everything together: homework, golfing, skiing, even dentist appointments. Now, when 5th grade came to a close, his family had decided to move back to Florida. The biggest shock of this was his willingness to move. Of course, he had the normal emotions related to moving, such as remorse and the fear of leaving a place you've spent your whole life. But when you boil it down, I could see he was actually excited. I was fascinated by the ability to leave your whole life behind and start something new without looking back. I couldn't imagine leaving Denver and moving away from my friends, family, and even Denver itself. The next year, I found myself out on the East Coast, touring prep schools on behalf of my brother. At the time, I had no interest. In my mind, I was upset because I was spending my spring break in a different and cold place. Then, we went back during fall break. The second trip to the East was spent touring about 8 schools all over New England, and I began to appreciate the totally different world. I can't say that I liked it more than Denver, but I was warming up to the idea. At this point in my life, I had only been to California and Arizona. Don't get me wrong, they're very different from Denver, but in my personal opinion, there's a lot of similarities. Like most of the streets form a grid. There are no straight roads in New England, and for some reason, this still kind of bothers me. The Boston area was different in every way. In March of 2012, my brother was accepted to several schools and chose to attend Proctor Academy in New Hampshire. There's a lot of reasons that Nico began looking at prep schools, and none of these reasons applied to me. A boarding school education was never really a consideration. The day Nico left for Proctor was filled with excitement, freedom, and sadness. Many of you don't know my brother, but if you did, you'd understand why I was excited. For other people, he was a normal kid. I love the time we spent together, but he could be a little bit of a controlling brother. As time went by, hearing stories about his school experience and seeing lots of pictures, the environment really intrigued me. I can't remember the exact moment that it hit me, but I mentioned to my dad that I wanted to join my brother. Deep down, I knew I didn't want to leave everyone and everything behind. The one thing that really drew me to prep schools was the independence of it. What I'm trying to say is I wanted to get out of the house, more specifically, away from my parents. Now, my dad either didn't understand this or decided to ignore it, because without anyone's knowledge, including my mom, my dad sent out some job applications. Before we knew it, he went off and got a job at Brooks. I remember the moment I was called into my dad's office. Everyone knows the feeling of walking into a room with your parents staring at you. I had no idea what to expect, but they asked directly, "How do you feel about moving to Boston to go to a school named Brooks?" I responded, "Would you guys come too?" Despite their answer, I accepted. Throughout the next couple months prior to moving, I had second thoughts. After telling my friends and seeing their reactions, the most common was, "Why the hell do you want to do that?" Or, "Sorry, man, that sucks." I struggled to leave, and at points, I had serious regrets. In the summer going into 8th grade, when it was time to leave, I remember when my friend Cole left for Florida. His excitement resonated with me. As it came time to finally leave the place I called home, I was full of optimism and enthusiasm for the future. Change offers an opportunity. I didn't know it at this point in my life, but I still embraced it. Although the East Coast is not my thing, and I look forward to my escape to the West, perhaps California for school next year. If I could do it over, I wouldn't change a thing. I just hope my parents don't follow me this time. Fast forward to my sophomore year, on a normal night filled with homework, videos, and social media. I overheard in the distance my mother on the phone in tears. My uncle's girlfriend was on the phone. My papu, it's Greek for grandpa, had been struggling with illness for a couple years, and his health had recently degraded to an alarming level. My mother flew out that night to be with him at his bedside. I was stuck in the East with a helpless feeling of regret. I wanted to be there. My decision to move away from them took on a greater meaning, and it killed me on the inside. Before we moved, our family would go over to their house every Sunday and watch the Broncos game and eat Papu's famous cheeseburgers. I spent my childhood over at their house, watching Scooby-Doo and Arthur. As I grew up, I bonded with my Papu, talking about stocks, investments, and saving for the future. After moving, we would only see them 4 times a year. On the day he passed, I was on campus at Brooks. The next day, my dad, brother, and I traveled back to Denver to be with family. 2 days later, we were on the phone with my grandma in Arizona, and my other grandpa, my dad's father, was having health issues. Lightning was about to strike twice, as he would pass that night. My brother wasn't in the room at this time, and I had no idea what had happened. I'll never forget the moment I told him this tragic news. We were both close to our grandparents, and this was the hardest time in both of our lives. Being together in that moment changed us both. It was impactful in a way that I simply cannot describe here today. Before this happened, me and my brother struggled to get along. We have contradicting personalities. It wasn't until this family adversity that my brother and I began to get close and enjoy each other's company. I saw him not as the dominant older playmate, but as my brother that I have a family bond. The brother that I've spent my whole life with. My brother that has gone through the same ups and the same downs as me. My brother that really gets me for the person I am. Thanks for being a great brother, Nika. I love you, man. I hope you grow up to be best friends like the guys in Wedding Crashers and Old School. All this family adversity makes you reflect on time spent with family. My biggest regret was not telling them I love them enough. It's part of my personality. I've always had trouble saying it, and I couldn't tell you why. My ex-girlfriend can attest to this. Within a week, my life flipped from right side up to upside down. It wasn't all bad, as the difficulties in my life revealed my true friends and changed my life in ways I continue to discover. At this point in my life, I always had the ability to reverse or change something bad, until now. I realized I couldn't keep wishing none of this ever happened, but instead embrace the positive time spent with my papu and grandpa. This past summer, I spent a lot of time traveling. A week of this time was spent on a service trip in Tijuana, Mexico. I dreaded going on this trip at first. I accompanied a Greek Orthodox parish based in Fort Collins, Colorado, in which my family has close ties with the church and the priest. This was the first experience I would have that was out of the country. My first impression, I was shocked. It was in Tijuana I learned the true definition of poverty. As Americans, we are sheltered from this level level of poverty. Don't get me wrong, we have serious problems here in the U.S. However, Tijuana was nothing like I've ever seen. When we first crossed the border and drove through the urban city, I saw hundreds of people walking around, seemingly nowhere to go. The crumbling buildings in the city was heartbreaking. There was broken down houses with large extended families squatting in them. Other families had made their own home from the trash of others, and some on landfills. Kids going to school where classes are conducted on the public trash dump site. People were working manual labor jobs in the summer heat just to buy a dinner of rice and beans to support their family. I've been taught about poverty in self and community class and seen depictions in movies, but seeing this firsthand is life-altering. When I arrived at the orphanage, I was impressed by the group of interns' willingness to devote their summers to help the people that live here. The organization, Project Mexico, was a home-building organization based in Tijuana. As an organization, they will build around 400 houses in a summer. The drive to work the following day opened my eyes to another world. A man with dirt smudged all over his body was cooking breakfast for his family on a small fire on the left side of the road. Let me remind you, this wasn't camping. This is in the middle of a densely populated city. I saw kids occupying their time in the heat with rocks and dirt, and stray dogs wandering the neighborhood. More importantly, the home of the family we were helping was a collection of wood fences, old garage doors, and scrap metal to support 2 rooms, a bedroom/kitchen, and a bathroom with no running water or electricity. 7 people lived in this one house. Thanks to Brooks's excellent Spanish program, I was able to communicate with the father of this family with surprising ease. What would one expect from a man with practically nothing? One would most likely be depressed, sorrowful, resentful, and desperate. Despite his situation, he was kind, thankful, positive, optimistic, and funny. Michael's attitude really shocked me. Some people with so much more, even here at Brooks, where we have it all, seem to complain all the time about things that are just not that important. Here is Michael, working hard simply to feed his family for survival. His genuine positive attitude is contagious to all in his life, and truthfully, he's a role model to me. I spent my week making friends, talking to the orphans, working with Michael on the house every day. The house was built in a total of 5 long, hard days, and he was there, helping every day. By the end of the week, a waterproof 1,500 square foot house was finished. It wasn't just the physical act of building this family a house, but it was what it meant for the family. Within just 1 week, 21 individuals directly changed the life of 7 disadvantaged citizens in Mexico. It was this trip that I found my true passion for the science and physics behind construction. It was this trip that I gained a new perspective on how I look at the world and its people. Throughout my life, I found that I've had 3 moments that have defined me as a person. I continue to find myself fascinated with the fact that your life can change in the blink of an eye. Your life is made up of decisions after decisions. In fact, the average adult makes about 35,000 decisions every single day. Most of these things are like, should I watch TV or do my homework? But a small percentage of these decisions have a greater impact. For example, what major am I going to do in college? Or where am I going to live for the next chapter of my life? I believe one's life is defined by the big decisions that take your life in a new and surprising direction. The next stage of my life is approaching fast, maybe a little faster than I'd like. I'm excited about the adventure that lies ahead. Although the friendships that I've made here at Brooks will last a lifetime, I'm excited to get out of the East Coast and its curvy streets and its cold winters. I'm a West Coast kid, and I always will be. Thank you all for listening to my story.